Hello YouTube, my name is Paul, hope you're all keeping well. Welcome back to another collection video. I start on my journey to try and collect every Hit Squad game there is for the Sinclair ZX Spectrum. Now the Hit Squad label has 115 titles on the Sinclair Spectrum. Very similar amount on the Amstrad and Commodore 64. They also launched titles on the Amiga, Atari ST, PC, MSX, BBC and I think one or two other different machines. So it's a very prolific budget label back in the sort of very early 1990s. Now my kind of history with the Hit Squad label was very brief, and I only really got into them when I got my Sinclair Spectrum back from my aunt's place. And I couldn't find any games for the Sinclair Spectrum, and luckily a newsagent across the road sold budget games, so Hit Squad, Kicks and a few other budget titles. So I used to go and pick up games on and off for the course of about a year for my Spectrum. I picked up cracking games like Green Beret, Renegade, Chase HQ, Wetlands, Rambo, all kinds of games for my Spectrum, which I absolutely, well, I was grateful to be able to get them again. And as time went on, I replaced all those games with full price releases. So my Hit Squad games that I bought back in '94, I no longer have, unfortunately. So yeah, so that's kind of the first reason why. And the second reason, there's a couple of really good YouTubers, some great chaps that I usually watch, have started collecting them themselves. So like Scott, Sega Zombie, who's doing really well at the minute, and recently has put up his own video kind of describing where he is with his own set, including an amazing find really early on in the collection. David Retro Games Played Badly, again, he's been sourcing these games now in bulk for quite some time, so again he's got a sizable collection himself, so it's fantastic to watch these guys pick up these old Hit Squad titles. Bearded Manchild, should do a missing section on you, mate, because I haven't seen a video from you for flipping ages. But he's doing it for the Amstrad CPC. He's going along quite nicely as well, so it's lovely to see these guys collecting for this iconic budget label. But yeah, like I said, they release games on various different formats, so there's plenty of choice out there. So yeah, so two main reasons why really. A, there is nostalgia for the label, but B, it's being inspired by these like great channels really. But yeah, so like I said, 115 titles to go for, split down into three different categories. You've got movie games, you've got arcade games, you've got sports games. For some reason you've got like a miscellaneous section, you've got 2 board games and 3 educational titles. But yeah, and again in terms of price, most of these games are cheap. And I would recommend you buy them in bulk, because if you don't buy them in bulk, you probably end up paying about 50% more per game. So yeah, I've got a lot of my games from online stores. So stores like Retro Gear, which is at Harper's store. He does have a channel of his own, but he doesn't put a lot of content on it anymore. And that's Retro. I'll come back to me in a minute. It's something to do with Retro. Oh, it'll come back to me. I'll leave a link in the description box below. Retro Cavern's another store I go on to. Picked up quite a few from him. He's got 25 pages full of Hit Squad titles. And there's a couple of other stores I've gone and picked up bits and bobs from. But they're the two main stores, Retro Cavern and Retro Gear. So pop and have a look at their shops. And see what they got, because they've got some cracking items in there. Not just Hit Squad games, but obviously games for the Sinclair Spectrum. But yeah, so that's it really. So what I'm going to do is literally probably have about, well, it's going to be about probably 10 or 11 episodes to complete the entire set. Problem is I'll get to about episode 9 and it'll just like slow down to a standstill, because some of the games, especially at the top end, as like any full set collection, are flipping impossible to get. So you've got games like the Addams Family, Darkman, Space Gun, Skull and Crossbones, WWF WrestleMania. There's quite a few, actually quite difficult and tasty titles to get under the Hit Squad label. So what I'll do is crack on with the first 10 games I'm going to pick up. Not necessarily any particular order, it's just the first 10 games I've taken down from the shelves really. But what I'll do is I'll do some cover scans. You can look at the cover scans and also look at the library number, because like I said, there's 3 different categories. And some gameplay footage, because some of these games I've never would have played before, from great publishing houses like Activision. Because they're not all Ocean games, even though it's an Ocean label. A lot of these games would have been from Activision. Actually, surprisingly, a lot of them are from Activision. But anyway, enough waffling, let's crack on with the first 10 games I've got for the Hit Squad set. See you in a bit. Right, let's start off with the first game then. So the first game I've got to show you is APB, which is arcade game number 29. Originally released by Domark back in 1989. It's a game I remember playing on the Spectrum first, then some months later playing it on the Atari ST. That's an arcade conversion from the Atari Tengen arcade cabinet, and it's a very good game, to be honest. I love it. It's just bloody hard. And I do love those top-down driving games. I like the games where they have some kind of cityscape. The fact you can chase after baddies, and it's kind of like a sub-level in between every 2 stages, I think, where you actually got to find a wanted criminal. So yeah, the game itself, then you're chasing down your quota of illegals, I suppose. People chucking litter on the road. I think there were the litter bugs, the honkers, all kinds of flipping shady characters. And every now and then, like I said, you had to go and get a wanted person. Either Candy Goodbody or Bernie something or another. He's an arsonist, I think. That's some quite good character names, to be honest. But yeah, I got it on the ST some months later, and the ST1 played very similar. Just was all in colour. And scrolling wasn't quite as bad, because on the Spectrum, rather than have it pixel perfect scrolling, it's scrolled by characters. So it flipping literally just lurched across the screen. But yeah, great game, great memories of this one. And great to have it back in the collection. We've already got it in the collection, but great to have the Hit Squad title. This particular one, again, quite easy to find and quite cheap. I don't think I paid more than about £3 for that one. That's APB. So next up, we got another arcade conversion. And these aren't all arcade conversions, but the arcade conversion element makes up the biggest chunk of the Hit Squad labels. That's Afterburner. I remember buying this one back in 1988, the year of the legendary conversion of Operation Wharf. A cracking conversion on the Spectrum. I think it was originally released by Activision as well, this one. But it did replicate the arcade quite well, considering the limitations of the Sinclair Spectrum. But yeah, great game. I mean, it could do the rolls to avoid the missiles, which was quite a cool feature actually on the Spectrum. But again, the game wasn't overly colourful. It did move at a decent little pace. Just wasn't a lot of scenery going on. I remember picking this one up at the same time as my friend Sam picked up R-Type for his Sinclair Spectrum. I think he got the better deal, to be honest. Another very common title on the Hit Squad label, and again, it shouldn't cost much more than a couple of quid to pick up. Now, the next game is the legendary Batman the Movie. Now, this one is movie number 19. Quite far down the list of movie games. But again, this is a similar sort of story to APB. I had this on the Sinclair Spectrum first. And about 6 months later, they finally got round to releasing the 16-bit versions, because obviously they were working on the sort of driving sequences, which the Spectrum, Commodore and Amstrad did have driving sequences, but they're completely different to the arcade, to the 16 bits. This game was originally published by Ocean back in 1989, and I thought the music was fantastic. Probably one of my favourite pieces of Ocean music ever on a Sinclair Spectrum. It's so atmospheric that when I got my Atari ST version some months later, the music was horrendous in comparison. The difference between the gameplay, I mean, the first stage, the third stage and the fifth stage are quite similar between the two. The driving sequences on the ST were absolutely sublime. Brilliant. An absolutely cracking game to get. Again, this one is very common, as you would imagine. And again, shouldn't cost you more than £2 or £3. But what a cracking game that was. Again, developed by the same guys who brought us Robocop and Target Renegade. God, what a pedigree they got. Next up is another arcade conversion. Now, this one was released by Imagine. This is arcade number 25, and that's Dragon Ninja, another game I had back in the day. This was quite early doors, I think, when I first started working at a little Saturday job. I remember going through Brixton, picking this up, taking it home, being quite disappointed with it. It's a good game. It's not bad, very repetitive, all in monochrome, but the screenshots there aren't from the Spectrum. I quite liked it. I used to be able to complete this one. Again, this would have been bought by me originally back in 1988. Maybe not, maybe 1989 actually, because I didn't have my job until 1989. I picked this one up. I did play it, I did complete it. Not a bad little game, nothing to shout out about. Again, on the Hit Squad label, it won't cost more than about £2 if you're patient. Now, next up is one of those anomalies I was talking about. It hasn't actually got a subcategory of its own. I've got no footage of this one because I've got no desire to even play it. And that's Fun School 2 for the under 6s. So there you go. This might be at my learning level, so I might be able to get on with this alright, but I don't really fancy giving it a go, to be honest. There's 3 of these. There's under 6s, 6 to 8s and over 8s, I think, and they're quite difficult to source. The only difference being at the front, apart from obviously it says 6.8 or whatever, is the colour. I think you've got one that's got a green band and one that's got a blue band. That one's obviously red. So yeah, quite difficult to find. Probably set you back at maybe £4 or £5 each. Right, next up is probably like Dave and Scott, to be honest. Probably one of the most iconic ocean games, probably the most iconic arcade conversions ever to land on the Sinclair Spectrum. That's Operation Wharf. What a game that is. This is better, in my opinion, than the 16-bit versions. This is Arcade 20. Again in monochrome. This is one of those games that I remember seeing in the magazine, and I could not believe they were converting this to the Sinclair Spectrum. And like I said before in previous videos, when you first see that massive Arnold Schwarzenegger sprite, which I've actually left in the footage so you can actually work out what I'm talking about, seeing how smooth it scrolled, even some of the levels where it became absolutely crowded on screen, the Spectrum still dealt with it really well. It did have a little tiny bit of slowdown, but it's that title tune as soon as it loads up, the flipping hairs on the back of your neck, so whoa, absolutely fantastic. It just takes you back to one of the most memorable moments for me with computer games. The fact that I picked it up from a computer fair, it was actually for me for Christmas. I did keep hold of it for quite a while before giving it back to be wrapped up. But I remember the whole flipping going to the horticultural place in Victoria, or Pimlico, wherever it was, to pick this up from a trade fair, or a full price variant, taking it home. It's just the whole experience really. My friend had it on the Amstrad, so I used to go around his house and try and get a fix of Operation Wharf on the Amstrad, which is again another really good conversion. But yeah, it's probably the most nostalgic game, I've got to say, of the era. Absolutely fantastic. And again, this was released by Ocean back in, what, 1988? A very common one to pick up. Again, shouldn't cost you more than a couple of quid. But yeah, such an iconic game for me, that one. A game I still play now. Just stick it on and off we go. Now next up is another game I picked up probably around 1989. I've got to be honest with you, initially I was quite disappointed with it. It looked amazing, but it played like a pig. That's movie 18, that is Red Heat. Now a game I played recently whilst doing some of my ocean videos, and I actually played it for a bit and I actually liked it. It's weird because you're sort of scrolling along as you do, those massive sprites looking fantastic, and you get to a certain point where you pick up a bonus or a B. I'm not quite sure what a B stands for. You pick it up, it gives you health. So if you play it well enough and get to the Bs every time you reach one of these health things, obviously you progress a bit further. And you've got to sort of dodge and weave quite a bit, because there's certain characters that just karate chop you. Avoid them at all costs, because it's really hard to get them. A couple of guys do dodge your punches. It's all about trying to move backwards and forwards and avoiding them. I got to the next level where you actually have a gun. It looked bloody amazing. I think it's in the hospital. But yeah, once you get used to how the game plays, it's a cracking game. And it's a decent film as well. Again, another cheapie to pick up. Our next one, again, along with Operation Wharf, is probably one of the most iconic Sinclair Spectrum games for me. Based on a film that I saw, like most of the time, I saw the film after playing the game. That's Robocop. The first time that title music loaded up, I did like my EY chiptunes, but the title tune for that was absolutely sublime. And it kind of married the game. It kind of tied in really well with how the game was, and kind of created that whole dystopian feel. Because it was quite sad and sombre, wasn't it, the old introduction tune. This is movie 22, by the way. I haven't even shown you that yet. And obviously, Robocop needs no introduction. I think it was released, well, I don't think, I know it's released by Ocean Software in 1989. It's one of those silly things you do as a kid. I remember going to the bank, sticking a tenner in the bank, because I just opened a bank account. Going back probably the next day, took the tenner back out to go and buy the game. Things you flipping do as a child, it's unbelievable. But yeah, this one's quite late on. Number 22, I'm assuming because it's spent so long in the charts, isn't it? Sort of 6 months at number 1 and about 2 years probably in the flipping chart altogether. But it's such a magical game for me. Holds some fantastic memories. But I just remember playing this on those bloody big wooden tellies as well. I remember one day that flipping telly catching fire. I think I was playing Renegade 3 on it or something. I think the TV even had enough of Renegade 3. But yeah, it's hilarious. One of those sort of like flipping late 70s, early 80s tellies. Yeah, it's Robocop. Cracking little game. Now next up is, probably for its time, the finest driving arcade racing game on the Spectrum. Now this came out the same year or the same time as Outrun. That's Super Hang-On. This is Sports number 9. Now this one was amazing. I obviously, well not obviously, I went for Outrun, not Super Hang-On. But Super Hang-On is a fantastic game. It really is. I think any machine that it came out on actually played really well, but the Sinclair Spectrum particularly, out of all the 8 bits, it was brilliant. I didn't have this game, I just remember it in Sinclair User magazines. It had a kind of split review between Outrun and this. So this got 10 out of 10. Outrun got 8 out of 10, believe it or not. But yeah, so my nostalgia for this game isn't that strong. But I just remember it being probably the best driving game of its type to grace the Sinclair Spectrum back in the day. Now that's only superseded by the next one, which was probably the best driving game, which came out probably about a year later, and that's Wetlands. Very similar to Robocop in terms, I put 10 quid in the bank just to take it out to go and buy the big box version of this. Now this game I only recently completed. It's taken me 30 years to finally beat it. It's one of those games where you're driving and the cars in front of you deliberately get in a flipping way. When you slow down to avoid them, they slow down like, well, same as you. And you end up driving at 5 miles an hour trying to avoid the car that's slowed down in front of you. So yeah, it took me ages to complete it. I remember the ending sequence originally, but I'm sure I cheated back in the day. This one's Sports 16. Again, not a difficult one to get. And this one was given to me by Dave. Retro Games Played Bad. He gave me 3 games. I nearly forgot to mention that, so thank you very much, Dave. One of my favourite Spectrum racing games of all time. Goes into the Hit Squad wall, so thank you very much for that. He also gave me a couple of others, which I'll mention when I come across them. So that is Wetlands. Now the last game in this series of 10 is Kongfu. Again, not very nostalgic in the fact that I had it. This one is what, Sports number 2. But I remember a friend of a friend playing this on his Sinclair Spectrum. And that's kind of where the memory of this game comes from. Really, I never played the arcade. Not for many years anyway, after I first saw the Spectrum. And the Spectrum conversion is actually very good. And probably for its time, it's probably one of the better beat-em-ups or one-on-one beat-em-ups on the ZX Spectrum. A cracking little game, to be honest. Again, quite common. Comes up quite frequently. I thought I'd get off the starting block really with 10 relatively easy games to pick up. But not only are they easy, but they're some of the best games released on the ZX Spectrum. So what I'll do now is try and do a video like this every month until we kind of catch up really. Either I complete the set or we catch up to where I've got to. But yeah, there's always at the moment games coming in the post from the Hit Squad, which is bloody awesome. So I can't wait for them to arrive at the minute. But yeah, that's it. It's a quick overview of what I got really. That didn't take long, did it? What, 12 minutes? So thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for subscribing. I'll see you again real soon. So take care and bye for now.